Understanding target shares, matchups, and underlying metrics has never been more important. Luckily, we're here to talk you through all you need to know, all the rankings, all the tiers for the wide receiver position in week 4. We're going to kick it off with the S tier. Very much. Don't even need to think about these guys. Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, Garrett Wilson, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and newly anointed superstar Rome Odunze. Tom, we're not going to touch on JSN because he is playing Thursday night and we are recording this before kickoff. But Rome Odunze, welcome to the superstar tier. Wide receiver 1 this week.
Yeah, and I mean wide receiver 2 in average fantasy points so far, thanks to the 24 points before that. But going up against the Raiders, they've allowed a league high 21% completions over expected on play action. I would expect that's something which the Raiders are going to key into. They've also allowed an 85% completion rate to the slot, which is again league high. The Raiders, just like where they're decent, they tend to be fairly decent, and where they're bad, they tend to be really bad. And somebody as smart as Ben Johnson, I think, is going to be able to latch on to those things. And what we've seen from Odunze so far is that he just seems to have a nose for the end zone, and those are the kind of guys that I want to bet on. Much as Amon-Ra St. Brown was somebody this offseason that, like, I started the offseason high on Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I came down on him, and it's one of my biggest regrets at this point because people kept saying maybe the Jameson Williams breakout's going to happen, and there were a lot of very convincing arguments for it. And then meanwhile, you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown who just goes out and does Amon-Ra St. Brown type things. Through 3 games, has 4 touchdowns, is averaging 11.9 yards per reception, has 20 receptions over the 3 games. And when you build it out, you just go, yeah, he's on pace for another excellent typical season for him. Meanwhile, Jameson Williams is looking like maybe not quite what people had hoped for. So very much looking at the guys who have that nose for the end zone and just trying to lean into it at the minute, particularly, yes, touchdowns can be up and down, but these guys are reliable. They see high volume, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's just plug and play, isn't it? I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown, over 30% target share each of the last 2 weeks. That's just elite. And yeah, it doesn't matter what's happening with the offense. When you're getting that sort of volume, you're going to get home. In the A tier, it is a big one this week. Davante Adams, AJ Brown, Zay Flowers, Drake London, Emeka Egbuka, Tutorial McMillan, George Pickens, Tyreek Hill, Ricky Pearsall, Lad McConkey, and Keenan Allen. Tom, Zay Flowers and Drake London, both disappointing last week. Are we expecting big bounce backs this week?
I think it was a tricky one for Zay Flowers. I definitely didn't see it coming that the Lions were going to shadow Zay Flowers so much. They shadowed DJ Reed on Zay for 65% of his routes, and it seemed to work for, obviously you look at the box score. Like, as the game went on, Lamar was holding the ball longer and longer, and then look, when you get sacked 7 times, when you get pressured 30 times, like, it really is going to limit what you're able to do in the passing game. I still have plenty of faith that Zay Flowers can bounce back here. We're going into Kansas City. It's a 48-point over-under. The Ravens or the Chiefs is going to end up 1-3 coming out of this week, and the Ravens absolutely do not need that on them. So I think that Zay Flowers has a good week. I think looking at Atlanta, some weird stuff going on with Atlanta, like, again, another one of these teams that are changing play callers, and also not changing play callers. They've sacked their wide receivers coach, and then they're moving the offensive coordinator down from the booth to the side of the field, which kind of speaks more to what are they doing with Michael Penix. Like, again, I've heard a few people make this point. They probably want eyes on him so they can coach him throughout the game. But Drake London, the usage is still incredible. I think that this game against the Commanders have been awful against the pass for quite a while now. They've allowed the 8th most fantasy points this year to the position, and I'm just willing to trust the volume for at least a couple more weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Drake London, hopefully, TJ Yates is the passing game coordinator. He's going to now become the wide receiver coach as well, which I've never heard before. But he's already talked about potentially moving Drake London around, getting him in the slot more. Michael Penix, he came into the season as, to me, one of the best downfield passers. You know, I threw him in the bucket with Geno Smith and Matthew Stafford, who's going to take risks and push the ball downfield. And he hasn't completed a pass over 20 yards yet. So hopefully we get to see Michael Penix bounce back and start to push the ball downfield accurately. Two other guys I just want to touch on. George Pickens, obviously ascending to the wide receiver 1 spot. Tough matchup with the Packers, but do you think potentially gets home just on volume alone?
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, the Packers are a tough team. They've not allowed a 20-plus yard passing play so far this year. I think that their defense is going to be very good at stifling the game and maybe frustrating George Pickens. But I can't bench George Pickens, or I can't knock him so much when you could be talking about a guy who sees a 30% target share without really having to push projections too much. I mean, the Packers have allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points for position, so I don't think we're talking like a nuclear blow-up week. But sometimes when you start working through these kind of rankings and tiers, you just go, who am I most confident in? Who's going to see huge volume? Who do I trust for talent? And George Pickens gets pushed up on those kind of reasons.
Yeah, and then the final guy I want to touch on, Tyreek Hill. He's been incredibly inconsistent against the Jets over the past few years. The last 4 games, his stat lines: 2 receptions on 5 targets for 23 yards, 9 receptions on 12 targets, 102 yards and a touchdown, 10 receptions on 14 targets, 115 yards and a touchdown, 2 receptions on 3 targets for 20 yards. So he's either going to score 20 plus fantasy points or 5 fantasy points. I have no idea which one it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's just he's seen his target share grow every week, which is the one kind of bit of encouragement. So maybe that's a sign that they're starting to figure things out and they are leaning into him whilst he's there. But I'm not sure you can ever start him with extreme confidence. The Jets have allowed the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers so far, so it's not like we're seeing Sauce Gardner lock things down, because across the field you've got Brandon Stevens, and we know that the rookie cornerback who they drafted is starting to see more snaps because of Brandon Stevens. So maybe they do an okay job on Tyreek Hill. I'd be okay playing him. I think I'd rather play him in DFS. And then just quickly on the Chargers 2 slot receivers, because obviously we've got Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey back-to-back there. Part of the reason that I'm so high on them is that the Giants, they've just been absolutely miserable to slot receivers. They've allowed a league-high 106 yards to slot receivers, and we're going to see both of those guys moving in and out of the slot.
Yeah, I think Ladd McConkey is one of the wide receivers who's underperformed his underlying metrics the most. You know, he's the wide receiver 3 in points in Los Angeles, but I expect him to have a real bounce back over the next couple of weeks. If you are finding this for the first time, you've made it this far into the video, you're obviously enjoying what you're seeing. Hit the subscribe button, get more of this content pumped out to your feed, and you will not regret it. Moving into our B tier, we've got Courtland Sutton, Jacoby Myers, Deebo Samuel, Brian Thomas, Devonta Smith, Quentin Johnson, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, DK Metcalf, Chris Olave, and DJ Moore. Tom, you touched on the 2 Chargers receivers previously. I've had more questions this week about Quentin Johnson than I think all other players combined. Are you buying into the production through 3 weeks? He is currently the wide receiver 5. Do you think he can keep that up?
It's a nuanced one, isn't it? I think that what we've seen from him is that he has a 26% first read target share through 3 weeks. Now, when you're playing with Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey, guys who can get open quite quickly or can, incredibly experienced, and you're still able to draw that much of a first read target share, that does kind of point towards there being something there. We've talked about before how Jim Harbaugh loves Quentin Johnston in a way that most fantasy managers can't understand. But Quentin Johnston, if he didn't have the drops, like if Quentin Johnston was a rookie and had started the season off like this, people would be talking about him as if he was, the next Jamar Chase. And I think at times we kind of have to just try and put our priors away, try and put things aside and say, okay, is it that crazy to say that maybe there's a 3rd-year breakout coming? Like, the Giants aren't a good defense. So, yeah, if we see another good week from Quentin Johnston, then maybe maybe we stop talking about Lad McConkey underperforming and instead just talk about Quentin Johnston being the better fantasy quarterback in this system right now?
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago it was a while ago when I started playing fantasy football, I think 18 years ago. But the third year wide receiver breakout was the thing. And now, if you've not broken out by your third year, you're a complete bust. So maybe that is it. I'm not fully buying in. I think I'd still rather have Lad McConkey certainly in the short and long term. But another player that I feel like we've talked about a lot this week, Brian Thomas Jr., had some issues with the catches, alligator arms, the yips. I've heard it described as all sorts of different ailments. Is it the ist? Is it mental? Is it just that it's a Trevor Lawrence issue? Do you think that this could be a squeaky wheel game and we just see an obscene volume forced his way in a potentially tough matchup, but one that could see a lot of passing?
I don't have any confidence in him. I mean, Warren Sharp put these stats out on Twitter, and out of 270 qualifying quarterbacks since 2020, Jags receivers through week 3 have given Trevor Lawrence the number 1 highest drop rate, the number 1 highest rate of total receiver error, and 32% of Trevor Lawrence's incompletions are on his wide receivers. Like, it's been brutal. Brian Thomas just looks like a player who doesn't feel comfortable in this system, and whether that's Shane Waldron, whether that's Liam Cohen's system being more complex, or whatever it is, just the Brian Thomas Jr. actually preferred playing with Mac Jones. I don't know. I'm sure there'll be some sideline shots to Mac Jones if Mac Jones is out on the bench, and we'll see. But yeah, I don't feel great about this game. I think this is a game which is kind of cruising towards the under. It's currently set with the Niners 3.5 point favorites and a 47 point over under. I'm very comfortable taking the under there.
Yeah, and then the final player I want to touch on, Tom, Chris Olave, insane target volumes, been over 10 targets in every single game this year. Hasn't got home in the touchdown category yet, but I feel like he could be poised to explode and feel like he's currently undervalued and maybe got him a little underranked here.
Maybe. I mean, based on a 3-game sample, which we know that we can do as much as we like, whether it's Rashee Rice or anyone else, he's on pace for 210 targets, 131 catches, and 935 yards. So maybe they are 16.5 point underdogs at Buffalo. Now, are we expecting there to be plenty of garbage time? Yes. And do we know the Saints are going to play fast and try to keep up tempo? Yeah. So maybe this is a good spot for him. Maybe if you build in Josh Allen stacks, maybe you want to bring it back with Chris Olave. I don't know. I still really struggle with the whole Spencer Rattler and New Orleans Saints thing. And generally, there's part of me that is just ignoring it sometimes when I can get away with it. But there's no denying what Chris Olave has done so far.
Yeah, absolutely. We've gone from 3 mega tiers to an itty bitty one. We've got Jaylen Waddle, Jameson Williams, and Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, Jameson Williams, I think you talked about during the Amon-Ra St. Brown piece. He's struggling a little bit, not seeing huge target volumes. Obviously, got 2 deep targets against the Ravens last week, early in the game, and then saw nothing for pretty much the entire game after that. Wan'Dale Robinson, we said, had an insane ADOT in week 2. Could he follow up? We doubled it in week 3. He's getting the ball pushed downfield with Jackson Dart under center. Do you think either of those two could be poised for potential big weeks, or is it just a case of they're a question mark and a headache?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a kind of headache tier, isn't it? Jaylen Waddle, we have weeks where he's excellent. He's finding the end zone this year, which is nice. It kind of helps when you're not seeing incredible volume to at least get there through touchdowns. Wan'Dale is being used further downfield. It'll be interesting to see whether we kind of see that continue now that Jackson Dart's in there and it's not just Russell Wilson throwing moon balls. I mean, the Chargers, they've allowed the second lowest completion rate on passes 10 to 19 yards downfield, which is kind of where Wan'Dale Robinson is going to eat a lot. So maybe this is a week to look for other options. But the usage so far has been really strong. And I think that it could be quite difficult when you've had that kind of strong usage to turn away from a player. I mean, Wan'Dale is the wide receiver 19 so far, but a lot of that is coming from that week 2 game because he's also had games of 5.5 and 2.6 outside of a 20.2 game. So if you're to ask me what is the real Wan'Dale Robinson experience, it's probably closer to those 2 other games than the middle one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Have you got flex questions? Are you trying to nail that final start-sit decision? If you want our opinion, get them in the comments down below. We'll answer 100% of those questions all the way up to kickoff, making sure you nail that lineup decision. Moving into the D tier, Khalil Shakir, Marvin Harrison Jr., Marquise Brown, Matthew Golden, Keon Coleman, Jerry Jeudy, Jawan Jennings, and Cedric Tillman. Tom, Matthew Golden, huge amounts of hype throughout the preseason and training camp, has somewhat disappointed through 3 weeks, now has a matchup with the Dallas Cowboys, who cannot cover anybody further than 10 yards downfield. Is this Matthew Golden week?
It really wants to be, because, like, look, what we've seen so far was very difficult in week one. It was one of those kind of, week one and week two was really just as far from what I expected, given the consistent hype from just about everyone around the Packers. The Cowboys, they lead the league in passing plays allowed of 20-plus yards. I put this in the Discord the other day. 11 completions on 16 attempts, 444 yards, 5 touchdowns. Nobody else has given up more than 230 yards and 2 touchdowns on passing plays of 20-plus yards. It is absurd how easy it is to pass on the Cowboys right now. So I would very much like to see it. And look, Matthew Golden's got an average depth of target of 15.5 on 8 targets this year so far. So if anybody is going to be the deep threat, perhaps it's him.
Yeah, and I'm putting a little bookmark on Keon Coleman. Seeing his snap share, target share decline every single week, was kind of excited about him after week one. I'm now very concerned. So hopefully it's going to be a bit of a get right game, and maybe we see him establish more of a settled role moving forward. Into the E tier, Darnell Mooney, Trey Tucker, Calvin Ridley, Jordan Addison, Romeo Dobbs, Tyquan Thornton, and Stefon Diggs. Tom, Trey Tucker, wide receiver 3 overall. Did you have that on your bingo card to start the season?
I mean, obviously, like, no, I mean, like, Trey Tucker, what he did last week was fantastic, and he deserved the attention that he got for it. He's got a 20% target share this season. Obviously, you're not going to get 8 for 145 and 3 touchdowns each week. But this Raiders team, they're bad on defense in certain ways, and they've thrown the ball a lot. And Tucker is playing plenty of snaps. Neither of the rookies in Jack Besh or Thornton seem to be getting a lot of playing time. And that kind of marries up with what we heard through the summer, that neither of them had necessarily grabbed that wide receiver role by the horns. And even if it's more like week one when Trey Tucker scored 11.4 points, that's usable in a lot of the leagues we play in where you've got 2 or 3 flexes. That's very usable on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, forgive me after posting, sub 12 points in the first 2 weeks if I'm not rushing to get too excited about Trey Tucker. But I can understand that if you're looking for a deep flex, then maybe that's the option. The other guy here...
Just lastly on that, and the Raiders, they're obviously playing the Bears this week. The Bears, they've given up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receiver position. So they're one of these teams that you do want to start the deeper options against.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Tyquan Thornton, who had him on their bingo card as the person to step up for the Chiefs. 27.27 targets per route run last week, 76% snap share. It feels like these numbers are real. Do you have confidence that Tyquan Thornton can continue to earn volume in this Chiefs offense?
Well, I think he can, and I think he can be all right, but I don't think that this is the week to play him because the Ravens, for whatever reason, Zach Orr has them set up. They're petrified of the deep ball. They're playing their safeties deep. They're playing their cornerbacks deep, and everything is just, after last year when the Ravens were torched by the deep ball for so long until they moved Kyle Hamilton further back, this year they seem to be just incredibly scared of that deep ball once again, which doesn't make sense because the secondary is far healthier than it was a year ago. And I'm not sure. I mean, this is how Jameson Williams ended up out of the game last week because the Ravens just sat deep so much. And I don't think that we're going to see a big week for Tyquan Thornton in that area.
Yeah, and then moving into our F tier, Travis Hunter, Troy Franklin, Kayshon Boutte, Eilek Ayumanor, Cooper Kupp. If you want my thoughts on Travis Hunter, check out this week's Dynasty Buys and Sells video. I went into depth on my thoughts on Travis Hunter. But Troy Franklin, last week's big waiver wire buy, kind of disappointed last week. Feels like this could be a get-right bounce-back game for him.
Yeah, I mean, he still saw a lot of playing time, and the problem with Denver wide receivers has often been that they don't see above like 60-65% snap share. He had a 94% route share last week in week 3, didn't convert much, as you mentioned, but he still had a 17% target share, and now going up against the Bengals, who are just truly woeful in every area of the game when it comes to defense, I very much feel like if you're playing fantasy and you want to put him in, then he's definitely worthwhile. But particularly if you're playing like 2 game slates in DFS on Monday, then Troy Franklin seems like he'll be a very popular pick in those.
Yeah. And that is it. All our wide receivers ranked and tiered. Don't overcomplicate it. Hit the like, hit the subscribe on the way out. Get those comments in the box down below and check out these other videos that we have released this week.